stay up here with me, though. We'll answer questions if people have them. Thank you all. Have a seat, please.
They didn't stand up for me.
What's that? That's, maybe they did. You've been so good, they're giving you a standing ovation.
That's not how it works. Well, I've talked way longer than I intended to, but I think it worked out good because I was really struggling with the fact that I was going to have to maybe talk for 10 minutes while the governor stood here and waiting for me to introduce him, and nobody really cared what I was saying anyway. So without any further ado, Governor Matt Bevin. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. It's been, feel like a little like deja vu, like I was right here with you not very long ago, actually. I hope you understand, and I think we have some microphones set up, that one of the most valuable ways I think that this will work, and is there any feedback in here? Are you doing all right? Okay, it's just me. I'm hearing myself twice. If you have any questions, please think about what those are, and even start to make your way to these microphones. I think one of the most valuable uses of our time together will be for the two of us to answer whatever questions you have with respect to things we are doing, things that we have done, and those things that we intend to do going forward. So anything at all that you want to know about this administration, I'd be happy to answer them. And it could be specific to manufacturing and the things that you are talking about at this conference, or it could be about anything else you're curious about. I'll make just a couple of brief comments, and that is, first of all, to say thank you to those of you that are here. Thank you for being employers. Thank you for making things. Sincerely, as somebody who's in the manufacturing business and has, from a number of perspectives, both through extrusion and metal stamping, had the opportunity to appreciate what a number of you wrestle with day in and day out. It is not easy. And I'll tell you, I was just joking earlier this morning with somebody, and I don't mean to pick on, but I look around the room and I realize there's not too many millennials in this room. It's a different day and age with younger folks in terms of employment. The expectations, the sensitivities, it has made some of your jobs harder still. It really has. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a reality. And so certainly, the cost of energy is a big driver in your industry. Workforce development is a big driver. These are two things that we are very mindful of in this administration. There are many, many other variables as well. Happy to talk about whichever of them you are interested in. But I do want you to know that we are committed to making sure that we continue to be very advantageous relative to states around us and relative, frankly, to anywhere else in this country as it relates to energy costs. It's an important factor. It really is. It's a big driver in whether or not people choose to locate here. We have tremendous other advantages, and you know them. We've talked about them. The riverways and roadways that transect through this state, fantastic. You couldn't replicate those, frankly, at any price. We have 4 seasons, none typically too extreme. We have occasional moments of danger with tornadoes. We just, as some of you are aware, had some tornadoes touch down in western Kentucky last night. Fortunately, nobody was killed, but there was some real damage. Some homes lost and some people injured. And that's, again, our thoughts and prayers are with those folks. But we're very blessed that as a state, that is the rarity. We don't have the expectation, as some regions of the country do, that on an annual basis there's going to be something of that sort. We've got 4 seasons, none of them too extreme. We've got an incredible quality of life and an affordability of things. These are advantages that we have that other states don't. But one advantage that we do have as well is energy costs that even now are about 20% cheaper than they are in many of the surrounding states. That's changing a bit as the energy landscape changes a little bit. And it's important that we continue to utilize the resources we have. Coal in particular, it still drives the vast majority of the electricity in this state and in this country. But it's shifting. It's becoming less of a contributor. That's a reality. But it's still a very significant part of our economy and our energy production. Workforce development, critical. You've got to be able to have employees. You need people that will show up on time, and be drug-free. It's not that complicated. It really isn't, and yet, sadly, it's much more difficult than it would seem to be. Critically, on top of that, though, we need people with skills. And I'll tell you this, and I mean this, we've perhaps had this conversation in the past. In no way, shape, or form do I want to dissuade people from pursuing the various highest degrees of education that they can pursue. As a kid who grew up poor in the country, I was blessed by opportunities that came my way to go to and graduate from college. But this idea that every kid needs to get on a fast track to some college degree, no matter what it's in, is nonsense. It really is. And we're forcing a lot of young people into getting degrees and things, you know. I've hesitated to, if I say a degree, I picked intentionally, as maybe you've heard, French literature, because there's literally not a public university in the state that gives French literature degrees. You would not know that by the blowback I've gotten. You would think that a good 50% of our state's graduates study French literature. But anyhow, whatever the degree might be, there are certain degrees that frankly are not real applicable in your world or in a lot of other worlds either. So we have young people who end up with a lot of debt, a lot of expectation, and not a lot of opportunity. We owe them better than that. So what you saw come out of this last session that I hope you take some encouragement from are a couple of things. Number one, on the workforce development front, we have dedicated over the next 2 years up to $115 million for workforce development. That is very, and I've been very clear in this, that if we spend none of it, it will be because there is nothing that is a good use of the taxpayer dollar. And yet, I will be very disappointed if we don't spend every cent of it, because we can and we should. There are opportunities to work alongside of those of you in the business community, in the manufacturing community. One of the things that put this in place, there was a catalyst, was a meeting I had with a group of folks who represented a number of key employers. Some of you may be in this room. I won't name the names, but these are people who employ thousands of folks. And they came together as a group and said, listen, when one of us has an expansion, it's great news, it makes headlines, we hire people. But when we hire people, we take them from him, and he takes them from her, and she takes them from that firm. And it's a trickle effect down to the point that now you have a little shop, maybe a little metal stamping shop with 40 employees, and they just lost their only tool and die guy. And they can't find anyone to take the place of that individual. These are the problems that we have to offset. Another thing that you saw, so we've put money into place to come alongside where the state can be the catalyst for getting these things in motion, providing capital to come alongside programs. Maybe it's a building of infrastructure and actual training facilities, but it's often coming alongside systems and operations and programs that are already in place. For example, in Northern Kentucky, there's a program, a German apprenticeship program, where they're graduating 24 individuals this year. Every one of those individuals has already got a job and then some. Every one of them. Why don't we put a 0 on the end of that? What do we need to do to scale that up? What do we need to do to ensure that we have 240 or 2,400? Heck, there's hundreds and hundreds of jobs. Any of you from Warren County? I mean, Bowling Green, my goodness, there's nearly 1,000 unfilled jobs right now in one county. Northern Kentucky, across those 3 counties, similar things. Jefferson County, we're seeing similar things. Hart County, kind of the middle of the state down the I-65 corridor, more than 100 unfilled jobs right now in one county. And yet, people need work. We've got to align things. Another thing we put in place, in addition to dollars that will be available to leveraging and expanding programs, is we have decided that we're going to start moving on to initially dual credit. Dual credit will ultimately lead us where I believe I think we need to go as a state, to dual track education. We need to start to get young people when they're 15, 16 years old and start to give them exposure to opportunities to feed themselves, to be engaged, to use the gifts that they have. Because not every kid wants to get a degree in interdisciplinary studies or whatever. Is that one safe? I don't know. Hopefully for all you interdisciplinary studies majors, sorry. But literally, I mean, we truly have got to give every kid, with rare exception, has got some latent talent somewhere that just needs to be tapped into. Giving them the opportunity to be exposed to that early on, a tremendous number of mechanically oriented, creative young people. And if we start them in high school with 10, 12, 15 credit hours worth of ability and experience and exposure to things, these will be the future employees for you. I mean, how many of you employ tool and die people, for example? You know, a number of you. What's the average age of your tool and die people? I happen to have two. Their average age is 72. I mean, so I had to think about that for a minute. Actually, it's probably 73 now. That's crazy. We need to backfill. So these are the things I'm focused on. As you know, and I've shared with a number of you in the past, I come from a background that's varied. I'm an entrepreneur, but I've had a lot of experience in the manufacturing arena. I understand some of the things that you wrestle with. Doesn't mean I know it all. Hardly. I'm a guy. Somebody asked me early on when running, what difference could one person make? And the comment I made, and I mean it, and I still mean it, more than none. More than none. And that's my commitment to you, is that I will do what is in my power to represent your industries, your arena, but also, frankly, all of Kentucky at the same time. You know, we're all in the same boat. Republican, Democrat, rural, urban, manufacturing, non-manufacturing, whatever the case might be, we're all in the same boat. If there's a hole in the boat, all our feet are going to get wet at some point. If the boat is sailing well, we're all going to get there quicker together. That's the reality of it, and that's my responsibility. So my commitment to you is through people like Secretary Snavely and others, we're going to be an open ear. We're going to hear you. What is it you need? And I mean it sincerely. It's not to say that you'll get it, but I can guarantee you this, you get 100% of what you don't ask for. So be vocal. Let us know what you need. And the last thing I'll say before we take questions, and so if anybody has any questions of any kind, you can either use the microphones that are here or stand up where you are and sound it out, and I'll repeat the question, whichever is preferable to you. But I'll tell you this, one of the greatest things we can offer to you from this administration and frankly from government in general is let us know what we can stop doing to you. I've probably had this conversation with you, but I mean it. There's any number of redundancies, extra hoops we ask you to jump through, things that we expect of you, paperwork to fill out, getting, permits from here, and here, and oh, by the time these ones respond, that one has, expired and you have to go back again. I mean, nonsense. What can we do to make your lives easier? Again, not a given that we can do it, but if there's any way we can do it, we'll do it. It really should not be so difficult to do business in any state, including this one. And my vision for this state, just so you know, and I've just come back from Europe, where I had this comment made to a number of people at a big industrial fair there in Hanover, Hanover Messe, which is one of their largest manufacturing and industrial fairs each year in Europe. But then also had a chance to meet with a number of employers who already have a presence here and others that are thinking of moving here, manufacturing related in particular. And one of the things that I've told them, and I've told other folks, my vision for Kentucky, and it's often been said, in fact, it's written in scriptures, without vision, the people will perish. Very true. We need to have a vision. We need to have a direction, a confidence that we know where we're going. And my vision for this state is that we will become the manufacturing hub of excellence in the United States of America. We already are there in many respects. People don't realize, for example, the fact that our number one export, and you're probably aware of this, number one contributor to our GDP is aviation-related parts. Everybody knows of the automotive and the bourbon and certain other things, but aviation, number one contributor. Many of you perhaps are involved in this. Why should we not be that hub of excellence to an even greater degree than we are now? If I were to ask you, if you were to build something in Europe, if you want it engineered and manufactured to the highest degree of excellence, where would you start? I'm willing to bet probably everyone in this room would probably start in Germany. Every time I've asked somebody that question, that's the country that immediately comes to mind. Why should Kentucky not be as immediately at the forefront of everyone's mind when they think about building in the United States of America? That's my vision, really. And you all are the ones that'll help us make it happen, literally. And we will help to facilitate that. So let us know what you need. What can we do to ensure that that is very doable? We're blessed with all the things we talked about. It's then a function of how we utilize those, how we leverage those, and how we streamline and simplify the process so that it really truly is easier to manufacture here, and that the workforce is more prepared and more able than anywhere else around us, or anywhere else in the country for that matter. It's very doable. We're already off to a decent start, and yet we have so much upside potential. So with that, let me table my comments for now. Questions you have on anything that I've mentioned, anything that was mentioned by Secretary Snavely, or anything else related to the broader scheme of things that you would like an answer to. Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us today, Governor. Appreciate that. You have a background in the pension business as well. There are some pension funds out there that are actively divesting of energy securities and stocks and that sort of thing. What kind of impact does that have on companies, say in Kentucky, or the energy industry in Kentucky as a whole?
Hopefully you all heard the question. The question is, as it relates to when people divest of investment in energy companies, what impact does it have on those companies that happen to be in the energy business and produce energy, including specifically those that are here in Kentucky? Certainly there's an impact. The investment, the markets are driven by two things, frankly, interestingly, and you've perhaps heard this said. It's very true. You see it not only in the investment arena, but you see it on a lot of fronts. You see it, frankly, with respect to where people locate their businesses. The two things that move the markets are fear and greed. And right now, fear is affecting a lot of what you see, including in the area that you mentioned. The reality is this: when we come into a place like this, you want the microphones to work, you want the lights to come on, you want the temperature to be what we want it to be. Energy is not going anywhere. We're demanding more and more of it. We're using more and more of it. There's going to need to be greater and greater production of it, which means that somebody is going to be the backbone of that. Somebody's going to be providing that, and there will be people that invest in it. I mean, if you look even at the price of oil, which is, a barrel of oil, and you look at what that has done, to oil stocks in particular. I mean, as of 2 months ago, they had kind of cratered out, and now they're back, 20, 30, 40% off their lows for some of the energy stocks. So you see this kind of, it's a pendulum, it really is. The coal industry is severely under stress. It really is, and we know that. I mean, this isn't a news flash, it's heartbreaking. I've had good conversation with people who have assured me that while maybe certain rail lines are being, less utilized, the track will stay in place. I'm grateful for that. It's important because when the pendulum swings back, and the times will come when it may. And I say may because we don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But I know this: no time in the lifetime of anyone in this room will coal not be the largest contributor to electricity production in the world. That's the reality of it. So people talk about the energy of the future is going to be driven by something other than coal, for example. Perhaps true. But the bridge from where we are now to whatever that future is going to be built out of coal and coal production and coal use. And it's flabbergasting to me that I look at some of these countries we want to be like Germany, that are forward-thinking and are energy, efficient and green and diverse. What are they doing right now in Germany? They're building 6 brand new coal-fired power plants, 18 of them in Europe. Why are they doing it? Because they actually want the lights to come on when they flip the switch. They want the heat to be there in the wintertime. They don't want to be dependent on Vladimir Putin and Gazprom, who provides 40% of the energy to the European continent. These are the kind of geopolitical issues that, frankly, are not going away. And I will say this, and then wrap up this answer to this question. Going back to the fear and greed, what's moving companies in Europe? I met with a number of companies who have no presence in North America, but are thinking of coming here. And I've been very frank with them, and I tell them, listen, I encourage you to think about coming here, specifically to Kentucky. But one of the reasons that people should is because you look at the geopolitical unrest in the world is significant. It is not going well out there. I'm sure you've been following along. It's a dangerous, crazy, dicey, tinderbox kind of world right now. The last bastion of any kind of stability, and it's hardly perfect, but the last continent that offers any true sense of real confidence and comfort is North America. And we're smack dab in the middle of it. And we are blessed with something in this state, in addition to the coal reserves that we still have an abundance of, decades and decades worth of. And there is a demand for this in the world like never before. More of this resource is being used than ever in the history of the world, coal specifically. So there will be a need for what we have. Timber, we have an abundance of. But we have another commodity that, frankly, 50 and 100 years from now, and mark my words, I would bet big on this. As surely as we value gold and oil today, water is a commodity of the future that is going to be of more value than anything else. Clean, potable, available water. We have an abundance of it. We're in the middle of the safest continent left in the world, smack dab in the middle of it, with seasonality that's very livable and doable. An amount of land and a cost of living that's like very few places in this country. And we have an abundance of water, a never-ending supply of it, truth be told. We've got an incredible amount of water. There will be a migration to this part of America. There will be. And we're in the middle of it. And we should be ready to handle that. And the people who come are going to expect the lights to come on. It's going to need to be powered by something. So while some may be divesting from energy stocks, the reality is there will be others behind them that will be investing because there's opportunity. Other questions on anything?
Yeah, Governor Bevin, thank you again for being here. I recently read a study by Deloitte that said while most of America is very supportive of manufacturing, there's a negative perception in terms of encouraging their children to go into it. And that's certainly something we see in northern Kentucky. Is there anything in the pipeline to try to address that?
Yes, the question, I mean, hopefully you all heard the question about how do you counter the negative perception that people have about manufacturing? It is not what it once was. It's unbelievable. You mentioned you're from northern Kentucky, and I always hesitate to pick out any single company, but I recently toured the Bosch facility up there, and I think there's about 1,400 employees that they have here in Kentucky. You could eat off the floor in that facility. It is so sophisticated. It is so high-tech. It is so impressive. I wanted to work there, actually. I was like, I'd be willing to just stay here, be part of the FAME apprenticeship program. It's impressive. It is not what it once was. This is why we're starting with dual credit, and it goes back to what I said about dual track. I want young people, but also importantly, and this is to the heart of your question, it's not just the young people, it's their parents, and it's the guidance counselors. We would do well to have field trips for the guidance counselors. We really would. I'm not even being a little facetious. These are the kind of things that I want to see happen, where we will get those people that are steering young people, sadly, often astray, to have a wider understanding of other options that are available. By offering dual credit, it will ultimately lead to dual track, which will afford us the ability to give kids better opportunities. So I think your point is well taken. It starts with me. I have a bully pulpit. I have a window of opportunity as governor to try to change that perception, and that's what I intend to do. I've done it multiple times already. I will continue to do it. Ideas that you have, let me know. If there are among you people that would be happy to open your facilities to some of these field trips, let us know. I'd love to be able to take tours of parents, guidance counselors, other folks within the high school ranks, secondary education. I'd love to bring these folks through some of your facilities. Let them see what modern manufacturing really is, the types of skills that are needed. They're frankly largely becoming tech jobs. It's incredible, especially given the automation. We need people that have the ability to keep pace with what modern manufacturing really is. But it starts with this office, and it's something we're going to take seriously. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Reisner, and I'm from JCTC. I teach many of your dual credit classes that you're talking about. I'm also a division chair there, and I work closely with the high schools in the industry in our area. I'm from Carroll County, and it ranks in the county's report from 2015 well below much of the Appalachian region. I would just like to invite you to come to our school and see some of the things that we are doing with business and industry and with the students so that we can continue this discussion about the things that you are interested in.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and we'll do it. I've had occasion. The KCTCS system is phenomenal. It really is. It's a gem that's underutilized and underappreciated because people really aren't aware of it. And like anything, and I'll be very honest, there are facets of it where we would do well to streamline. There's facets of it where, frankly, we're investing dollars where maybe the ROI isn't what we'd want it to be. But as it relates to the comments you just made, it is spot on. It is about as well positioned, including JCTCS, which is, or JCTC, I guess. I sometimes put extra letters in there. But I mean, literally, these are the kind of things where we need to use those. When I talk about this $100 million that I put in there for workforce development, it is literally to come alongside organizations like that, institutions like that, with private sector businesses and education institutions like that, and come up with programs that provide the quality graduates that our employers want. I'm telling you, we could graduate thousands of high-tech manufacturing employees, and we could employ every one of them. Because I'll tell you, even if they didn't get a job in this state, although frankly, if we continue to do things right in this state, it'll be better. I want you to understand, too, there's several key things that I'm working on. And I have a challenge for each of you, for you and your employees. Take ownership of this state. You're doing it already. You're funding it. You're literally the backbone of it from a manufacturing standpoint, from a taxpayer standpoint. But I need you to take ownership of it as it relates to what we do politically. Because there are a handful of things that we need to do to truly make this state the manufacturing hub of excellence in America. Number one, we need to pass right-to-work legislation. That's a fact. It has to happen. It really does. And it is going to come. It's a matter of fact. We're the last state in the South. We're the only one in the manufacturing belt from Wisconsin to the Gulf. And we're the buckle of that belt. We're right in the middle of it. We're the only one that has not passed this. It's a simple thing. But literally everywhere I go, including in Europe, as I talk to site selection people in this country, fully 1/3 of companies that are interested in locating somewhere in our region will not come to Kentucky because of that one thing. 1/3. Now, many will, but that means we're fishing in a pond that's 2/3 the size of the states around us. Why would we do that to ourselves? Why would we volitionally fish in a smaller pond? Bad idea. That's one thing that has got to happen. We need tort reform in this state. We truly do. We've got to make it easier on the manufacturers to do what they can do without fear of all of the circling legal entities trying to take them out. On an industry different than your own, we take pride in talking about how we're the center of aging health care in America, in the Louisville area. And I've heard that said many, many times. And indeed, we have many companies headquartered there who serve that industry and that need. But the reality is you also, in those papers, have full-page ads almost every week from lawyers trying to get people to sue those very same companies. Why? Because it's so easy to do in Kentucky. We need tort reform. We do. We need regulatory reform. It goes back to what I said about all the things that we can stop doing to you. We need regulatory reform. We need to start getting things off the books. I had a meeting with my team yesterday afternoon. I've got one member of my team who's dedicated right now to finding all of the hundreds of regulations, many of which serve no constructive purpose. And we're going to analyze them, and those that we can get rid of, we're going to get rid of. Because really, it's nothing but burden on burden on burden. We need educational choice in this state. We're one of 7 states in America with zero competition for public education dollars. We need public charter schools. We need to start to encourage things like dual-track education. We need changes on that front because what we're doing is not serving the needs that we have. We need pension reform severely. We need tax reform. We need to move from taxing those of you on the production side to moving to more of a consumption-based tax economy. These are the realities. We know this is what we need to do. But there is none of that. We need to get rid of the inventory tax, for crying out loud. We're sticking it to those that are the producers because we have such an antiquated tax structure. But all these things that I've mentioned, not one of them will come out of committee if we have a Democrat-controlled House. That's the sad reality. And I know there's Democrats in this room, and there's people who've been lifelong Democrats, and there are tax-paying, business-owning, conservative, fiscally responsible Democrats. But guess what? You're not represented by people cut from the same cloth in Frankfurt. And the people who control what does or doesn't come out of committee, what does or doesn't get heard on the floor, what does or doesn't get voted on, are people who are cut from a very different cloth than that. That has got to change, because not one of those things I just mentioned, not one of them will see the light of day. Not one of them. Won't even see the light of day if we don't take the House this fall. And I would encourage you, as I've encouraged other people, vote your values, not your party. Vote your values, not your party. If we do not flip the House in 2016, this November, all those things I mentioned are going to continue to wallow along, and we will be a pale version of what we could be. So if you've ever been engaged, be engaged. If you've ever cared, care now. Fire yourself up, fire your employees up, get people out there, vote. Because we're a few seats away from all those things being more than possible, being almost a given, and we need them. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Governor, it's good to see you here at KAM, and we appreciate your comments. Kentucky has a rich tradition in manufacturing. We have the aluminum industry in the western part, and we have AK Steel that you'll see down toward Ashland. And in the last couple of years, these industries have struggled and stumbled under the burden that's been put on them because they're heavy users of electricity. And the General Assembly, 3 years ago, we began to try to address what Texas and other states have done to make it more affordable for these manufacturing industries inside their states by looking at different packages compared on their feedstock. We couldn't get anywhere in Kentucky. 3 years in a row, we introduced legislation and couldn't even get a meeting over there to try to make a difference to save some of these industries from just simply leaving the United States of America. For those in this room, they know many of these companies make the raw materials for your products. So to have them leave and go offshore is just really unacceptable, especially with the rich history they have. But hopefully with a new administration, a new approach to looking at how do we, I saw your trip out of the country and you were talking to another industry that was looking at coming into Western Kentucky, I think. And we can use all of those you can bring.
Yeah,
If we don't,
this particular one was a cold-rolled steel plant.
I saw.
Yeah.
If we don't address the energy issue for them, and we've got a very unique situation with our energy in the western part of the state like none other that I could find. But if we don't address that and fix that, then we're just going to continue to wallow, like you said, and never gain the steam that we need to be productive, to keep these industries strong, to keep them employing the amount of people they've had in the past. And Kentucky will lose a very rich part of our history. So I look forward to working with you, but I wonder if you'd comment on, as we're recruiting these industries in here, what are we going to do differently to help them stay afloat and to get the people that are behind them to decide to invest in the expansion and the new equipment and the new pot lines and all the stuff that they can do here that in the past couple of years they've chosen not to do so?
One of the things that will answer that question is driven by the demand. You know, the demand for the materials themselves. You know, this particular company actually it's Bill Stein. A lot of the companies I met with, we don't mention their names because we're in various degrees of conversation. But Bill Stein, which is a cold-rolled steel company, a large producer globally, is putting their first footprint in North America out in western, kind of southwestern Kentucky. Not far western. They're going to be in the Bowling Green area. But I'll tell you what's interesting about that company. They actually have, when I was over there at their headquarters in Germany, I met with a bunch of Kentuckians who they have over there right now training and learning their way of doing things. And so it was interesting. I met them for the first time in a small town in Germany. But these are the kind of things that if we do more of this, making sure that we have a workforce that's prepared and ready and able. They want to be here. Why do they want to be here? Because of the thing you alluded to, which was that we're in an area where there is a lot of demand for their product. They can do some very specialized things. I mean, they roll to various different degrees. They can roll to different dimensions in the same coil. It's phenomenal, the things that they are able to do. And bringing that expertise is terrific, but guess what? All those half a dozen things I mentioned just a moment ago, if we don't fix those things, they will not come, or far fewer of them will come than would have otherwise come. And this is why I beg of you, vote. I mean, I've given you my thoughts as to what I think we need in terms of business-minded people. People who are for less regulation, less taxation, easier for us as business people to do what we do, not at the expense of things that matter, but not also to such a degree of hindrance that everybody wants to go to Texas, for example. I mean, how many of you have ever been to Plano, Texas? I mean, it's insane. They are turning that thing into, like, you would think It was Southern California. I mean, Plano, Texas is not a very nice little part of the world. It's hot and dry and miserable, and it is booming. There is nowhere that is booming more than that. Why? Because of those things I mentioned a moment ago they've gotten in front of. This is how we're going to do it. How we will bring those companies here and how we will keep the AK Steels that you mentioned, among others, strong is to have demand for their product. And given the nature of logistics, given the cost of movement of large, quantities of heavy material, having close proximity for just-in-time inventory and just the logistical costs being minimized, having it close is absolutely desired. We are better positioned than any state in America to see a resurgence and an incredible upside. But we've got to get our financial house in order. We've got to get our political house in order. We need to get our regulatory and our legal and our educational houses in order. That's the reality. Yes, ma'am.
I was told this was the last question, so I'll make it quick.
All right, make it a good one now.
I
No
hope so.
pressure.
My name is Heather Mullins, and I'm a workforce development specialist in the Carroll County Career Center. I had to write it down because I was real nervous.
No worries.
There are a lot of manufacturing companies between Carroll and Gallatin County. Can you speak more on what your plans are for workforce development in the state as a whole, and what your plan, what would be your perfect idea for the $115 million?
Sure. I mean, the question, again, I make sure I understand it specifically to the region of Carroll and Gallatin and just workforce development in that
more
community.
rural counties, yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you, how many of you have ever driven down from like Cincinnati to Louisville on Highway 42? A number of you. It's phenomenal. It is remarkable what happens along that corridor that most people are unaware of because they stick to 71, for example. It's important to understand a couple of things. People talk a lot about, hey, we want fruit in our community. And trust me, a lot of these communities that are struggling where business has declined or pulled out, these communities are suffering. And I understand we want fruit in those communities. But those fruit grow from blossoms, and those blossoms come at the end of branches. And those branches are attached to a trunk, and that trunk needs a strong taproot. And it's important to understand this. We've got to have a strong taproot and strong trunks before we can have branches, before we can have blossoms, and before there'll be any fruit in these communities. The wonderful thing about the counties that you just mentioned is that they're right off of a major, major trunk. The I-71 corridor is a strong, strong trunk. We have a handful in this state. We have I-65 and I-75 that are perhaps well known and regarded more than even the others. And yet we've only begun to tap those because, digressing for a second, and I'll come back to those counties, how many of you went to Knoxville or Chattanooga 15 years ago? How many of you have been there since then, like in the last couple of years? Unbelievable. Why isn't that London and Corbin and Richmond? That potential is there. Absolutely. Should be. If we get our house in order, it will be. Confident in that because we have advantages over those communities. But why is it that those communities down there have done so well? Because they too are located on a strong trunk. So the I-75 trunk is a strong trunk. If we have a strong trunk, it will send branches out into some of the communities off of those trunks, and ultimately will blossom, and ultimately fruit will bear in those communities, and people will benefit from that. But the idea that you're going to just have fruit off of these major trunks is not easily done. The good thing about Gallatin and Carroll and some of these other counties you mentioned, they are right next to a very strong trunk. It is our job to ensure from an infrastructure standpoint that we maintain that. I just yesterday, I think it was, or 2 days ago, sometime this week, was just down in Rockcastle County, where we were doing a ceremonial bill signing on the fact that we're going to widen that I-75 corridor from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. That's going to be an incredible improvement to that particular trunk. We have the 64 trunk that goes east-west. We have the 69 trunk in western Kentucky that's largely unappreciated by people. But I've accelerated forward on that trunk the environmental and engineering studies for the Henderson Bridge, so that we can ensure that that becomes an integral part of the interstate commerce system. It's the only system that runs from Canada to Mexico straight through the middle of America and right through our state. These are 3 strong north-south trunks. 71/75 also come together and form another strong trunk, and 64 as an east-west trunk. We have got to pour into these, because then from those, the opportunity into the communities you asked about will come. And people don't appreciate that, interestingly, those counties you just mentioned have I-71 on one side, and even more closely on the other side, they have the Ohio River. In the Ohio River, now that they're widening the Panama Canal, there is nothing we produce in a Carroll County that can't go to anywhere in the world. Nothing. Or Gallatin or one of these other counties, which is why you see some of these large steel producers that have been there historically and continue to be. These are the opportunities before us. But I'm begging you, as I close up, take ownership of this. I can sit here and talk to you all day long. This isn't a game to me. I don't particularly, and I'll be very honest with you, I don't love politics. I really don't. I don't enjoy the political ranks. I'm a business person. But I did this because I was tired of pumping dollars into a system that was not being a good steward of what we did. We bust our tails to make payroll. We take risk. We expend capital. The things you do day in and day out, do not assume there are people in Frankfurt or Washington who have the same degree of conviction that you do, that we need to do the right thing. Don't be convinced of that, because they're not largely there. There's a few exceptions, but not enough. And I ran for office because I believe in America. I grew up poor in the country. I'm a military veteran. I've seen people who've laid their lives down. I've served with guys whose kids have grown up without a father. I do not take these things lightly. The American dream is real. The opportunity before us is significant. We are the last bastion of hope. It saddens me when I see that we celebrate that which divides us in the base elements of our society. But we're better than that. And the last candle of hope in the world is coming out of this country. And the backbone of this country is made up of people like you and the people you employ. Own it. Take ownership of it. Get out and vote. Encourage people to vote. This isn't a game. We can fiddle while Rome burns, but it's still burning. And it's up to us to stand in the gap. There's a verse in scriptures about the watchman on the wall. I don't remember where it is, but it's about the watchman on the wall. Well, it doesn't do us any good to see trouble coming if we don't sound the trumpet. Sound the trumpet. Be the people in your respective communities that sound the trumpet. You know what's coming. You see it. You deal with it every single day. You see the encroachment of an overbearing government. You see the suffering that you come under and so many others due to overtaxation and the amount of difficulty. Where's the impetus for someone younger than us? I look around this room on average. I'm probably the same age as most of you. I'm 49 years old. Where's the generation for the people behind us? Where's the impetus for them to step forward and do what we did? Where's the likelihood that they're going to take the kind of risk? How are we encouraging them to take the kind of risk they need to take? We're not with the path we're on. What's going to change that path? You're going to change that path. I'm one person. I'm the tip of the spear. Whether that spear hits the mark or the force with which it hits that mark is going to be driven by those of you in this room. Take this seriously, I beg of you. Because if we don't do it now, when? The time is now. Thank you. I appreciate it.